Hi everybody, Steve Griffiths here, developer of the MTPredictor software program. Before we start today's MTPredictor video, I'd like to have a look at our risk disclaimer and just remind you all that all the examples in these videos should be considered as hypothetical. They weren't taken, they weren't traded. That's not what these videos are about. Also remind you there is risk of loss in trading and investing. You should always use stops and there always will be losing trades. The trick is keeping the losses small. But that is just to remind you there always will be a loss in trading and investing. You should always only invest or trade with money that you can afford to lose. And all trade decisions are your own sole responsibility. Right, let's go and have a look at how the US markets are unfolding on the day before the US election. So today is Tuesday the 8th of November in the UK in the morning. So let's have a look at the daily chart of the ES. In my last video what I did was I put a DP support zone from this low here, and I said that there was potential support available at that particular area. I also said that if that area was then breached, then the next support zone would be off this low, and it's right the way down here. So the markets had a potential for a sharp fall. But just as we go into the election, we are looking at a small rally off this support zone. But I still hold the view that if this support zone fails, then we could get a big decline after that. The reason I say that is if we go and look at, I'll look at the spiders, the SPY stock for a slightly longer term view. This is a weekly chart. So this is why I've got a slight bearish view on the US markets longer term, is if we look at the weekly chart, here's the last high back here. When was this? This was back in May. So from this high here, which was the last major high, we right mouse click, we do DP. Can you see how we came up to, I shall put that on again, oops, sorry, and we came up into the 26th of August here, or the end of August, this is the weekly chart, into major resistance. So this is why I'm slightly bearish on the US markets, is on a longer term chart, this weekly chart of the SPY, we hit major DP resistance back in August. So I think the major trend looks like we're actually turning down. So on the shorter term chart, if we go back to the ES, the two areas I'll be looking at on the election are this support zone to see whether it holds. If we do get a slight rally, then the next area of resistance would be the DP off this high here. You can see there it is up at around the 2159 up to 2170 area. If the unlikely event happens and we do get a bit more of a rally, then the DP off the high up into that area there would be the next major resistance. So they're the areas I'll be looking at. Minor resistance here, major resistance here, all set in the backdrop of major resistance coming on a longer term chart on the weekly chart back up in here in August. So this is going to be very interesting. Again, what I am looking for is if this DP area here fails, then the next area of support is right way down here at what, 1940 odd, down to 1916. This is the next area of support. So there could be a potential for a big drop. Of course, trying to trade just before such an unsure US election as this is obviously very dangerous, and I'd probably recommend that people sit on the sidelines until the dust clears and we actually get settled. Because remember, trading is all about risk control. It's not about trying to gamble, about trying to predict where the markets are going. That's actually dangerous. In fact, it is gambling, and you'll actually lose a lot of money doing that. So it's far better trading when you get good setups where you can control the risk. In other words, when the losses come through, and they will and they do, then the losses should be kept small. Good example of this is on the NQ yesterday. I'll just clear this all off, take that DP resistance zone off, and have a look at this particular setup we had here yesterday. Just put more data on the chart. There we go. Here the market rallied yesterday. Rallied, made a high at what's that, about 12 o'clock, mid-morning there, or late morning, started to decline down, then came back up and made an ABC correction. It made an ABC correction into here at 1342. Our new MTP trend indicator, you can see at this particular point in time here, was actually grey or black. In other words, it indicated the large view trend was flat, therefore you could take two sides. It did go blue for a little while afterwards, but then turned back grey again. There's a history triangle here, so we can place the setup on the bar afterwards. If I right mouse click on the red MTP reversal bar, do analysis, you can see we had a TS3 HG. HG stands for, just clear that all off again, HG stands for Holy Grail trade setup. Why do we call it a Holy Grail trade setup? Well, if I move that across, it's because this is a potential wave 2. After a wave 2, we're then anticipating a wave 3. Therefore, we're looking to go to the typical wave 3 WPT. As you can see, this just clipped you into a short trade there, came back up, and wouldn't have stopped you out. This was actually a double top with that high there, so would have not taken you in, a double top. So you would have been still short, down into the first target there for a nice 3.8R profit. If you hadn't have got in just at that low there, because it would have been very dubious whether you would have actually been filled right at that low there. Let's clear everything off. There was another Holy Grail attempt at this high here, again on a black MTP trend. So if we right mouse click on this one, you'd have definitely been taken in here. That was actually a better trade because the market went straight down there, straight to our typical wave 3 WPT target for a plus 5.3R profit. So it was a nice example there, but the point being is you could have controlled your risk. That's what trading is about. It's not about gambling and trying to guess which way the election is trying to go. It's about getting into a trade setup where you can come in with a small controlled risk, then over time your profits are larger than your losses. But remember, there will be losses along the way. I'll say that again. Every trader knows that there will be losing trades. The trick is keeping them small. So anyway, that was a nice trade setup there. Again, either coming in on this first setup here, but if you didn't get filled on that bar, because you can see it was actually a low of 70.50 and the entry level was 70.50 again, so you may not have got filled on that. If you hadn't got filled on that, then there was a second attempt here. The second attempt was actually better for a nice 5.3R profit. So either way, a couple of good trades there, or a good trade depending on whether you got in the first one or the second one on the NQ yesterday. And a great example of the MTPredictor Holy Grail trade setup. So anyway, to recap, here are the resistance and support levels on the ES daily chart. We came into support a couple of days ago. This is where the bounce came in and we've rallied off that. There's a potential resistance area just up off that last swing pivot high, a major resistance off that top. But if this level here, if the low of the fourth gets taken out and we go down, then there's a long way before the next support zone. So hold on to your boots over the next couple of days. It's going to be very interesting to see how this election unfolds, but for us it's going to be very interesting not who wins the election but what the effect on the markets are. So again, I don't recommend you do any trading over the election results. I suggest you stand aside and wait till the dust settles, and then we can get back to a bit more normality later in the week and next week after the markets settle down again.